Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, are you still thinking about writing that book?
Well, I am. But the thing about writing a book is you've got to invest a fair bit of time. And we've met somebody who actually helps you write your book in under 90 minutes of your time. Welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast, Stuart Bell.
Hey guys, great to be here. Good to spend some time with some fellow Brits.
Well, we are fellow Brits, but you're not actually living in Britain, are you?
No, I am across the pond over in the US.
Whereabouts?
Up in the northeast, so on the convenient time zone of the East Coast, so kind of sits me nice in between the East and the West. But yeah, I've been across here for 5 years permanently and kind of 12, 13 years in and out prior to that. So yeah, quite some time.
What attracted you to go to the US?
Well, two things. So one, my business partner's over here. So we started a business together 2011, I think. So that was what originally brought me across. And then more recently, my wife's across here. So we knew each other back in college in the Lake District in the 90s. We stayed friends. Lucy came across here straight away after college. But as I was across here more and more often, we kind of reconnected and we got married in 2018. So that's why I'm across here permanently.
Wow.
Excellent.
Recently married. So, I mean, I've got to say, well, yeah, actually, hold on a minute. You're coming up to, no, my maths isn't very good. You're actually,
well, do you know what? I think 2018 is recent as well. But then I start adding the numbers up and think, no, that's not right.
No. Well, I mean, it's a 7-year itch, isn't it? Once you get over that, you'll be all right. I mean, you've got another year to get there, kind of thing. But
we're going to go past it.
Now, anyway, with this great knowledge of numbers, so how do we manage to make 90 or 100 days to write a book suddenly turn into 90 minutes? Or is this yet another bit of Arrowsmith maths?
Well, there is a little bit of special math in there somewhere. So it's 90 minutes of your time and then many, many more minutes of our time. So what we're trying to do is this idea of if you need more business, so something that you can do in the next 100 days, increase the business is get more clients. So get more clients, one of the easiest ways then is to engage with more people. And one of the easiest ways to engage with more people in either the top of the funnel sense, so brand new people, or re-engaging people that you've already got a relationship with or referrals. One of the easiest ways of kicking off that conversation is to write a book, because you can either start the conversation with new people by adding value, or you can re-engage existing people by picking up the conversation where you left off by using the book as the example of the talking point. So a lot of people in the traditional world of publishing see books as kind of things where you've got to lock yourself away in a cabin and it takes a long time and it's difficult, and editors are there to mark your work and send you back with more homework, which we all said before that none of us are a fan of. Whereas what we really want to do, a conversation starting book where the outcome, the purpose of the book is the conversation and not the book itself. The book is just a mechanism to get to the conversation. Then really what we want to do is create and bring together something that adds value to that group of people that you want to talk to. And because we've all been in business for long enough, we've usually got that information in our head already. So what we want to do in those 90 minutes is extract that from you, and then we can take the heavy lifting of the painful part of the process after that.
I mean, it's something that many business people are going to be really attracted to, because it does fit that gap, doesn't it? It gives you authority, doesn't it? One of the things about it, it gives you other things as well, but let's just start with authority. If you have a book versus a guy who doesn't have a book, and it's a fairly equal sort of pitch between the two of you, who are you going to go for?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. So we've been doing this for 10 years now. We've done over 1,000 books with people. So we've obviously got a lot of stories. So on our podcast, interviewed one of our authors about 6 months ago, a guy called Paul Ross, is a podiatrist. So he's written 3 or 4 books. And the latest one he did was a pretty small book, but it was called My Damn Toe Hurts. And I keep retelling this story. And every time I do, I promise myself that I'll go away and remind myself of what the actual condition is that makes your toe hurt. but then none of us like homework, so I never do it. So anyway, this book, the other books he's got are for heel pain and plantar fasciitis and those types of things. This one, My Damn Toe Hurts, it's for whatever that condition is. So when you think about that single target market, he could do lots of things within his practice, but that particular group of people that he was trying to attract was this toe hurting group of people. So he was retelling the story of a client who came in, no connection, didn't know who the person was, came in for a consultation or a toe wiggling, whatever the actual practice, whatever the remedy is. And halfway through the session, the client suddenly, the penny dropped for them, and they were all kind of starstruck a little bit and saying, "Oh, you're Paul, you're the Paul that wrote the book." And the client had read the book and done the little exercise he was suggesting, and then it was still a problem. So he'd come in, and that authority and the credibility, even in a niche that's so small and local that you wouldn't imagine had that authority with it. But the fact that this client had seen Paul's ad in a Facebook ad, I think was the first connection, had resonated with the title because this was a problem that they exactly had got value from the book because it had given a couple of kind of like manipulation exercises or something that you could do with your shoes to try and get past it. None of that had worked. So the obvious next step was the call to action in the book, come in for the consultation and the practice. And then all of that authority that had kind of built up that this was the right answer was then amplified, that he then actually got to sit in the chair and had his toe wiggled by the guy who wrote the book. So another friend, I don't want to go into too many stories, but another friend has an icy disc practice. So that's a tax scheme in the US, very, very small and niche. But he goes to industry conferences, and Dave is the icy disc guy because he wrote the book, Is an Icy Disc Right for Me? So yeah, absolutely carries a lot of that authority with it.
This makes a big difference because, I mean, Kevin is into sort of talking to financial officers and our chief financial officers, and he has a separate podcast about that. And that's one of the things. Now, for him to write a book on the subject would put him right in the center. And we have friends of the show, Kevin, that, I mean, one of our friends is doing a podcast on cannabis, but being in the center of that market and being seen to be the authoritative voice in that market is not, he's not sort of a drug pusher or anything like that, but it's just basically, well, I guess up to a point he is. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean,
he would. That could be a bit of a short-lived career if you write the book on that and then start giving it to people when the cops come looking for you. They've got
so you're the authority. No, I guess that's but the point is that there are so many ways to actually help people with that drug or with the plant cannabis. Then he's kind of in the center of that. So there are certain people that we know, even within this, between the three of us, there's probably 3 books that make us all authority. I just ask the dumb question here, Stuart. How have you ever had a book done on your own talents?
Yeah. So the books that we use all the time, because again, you want to kind of eat your own dog food or whatever that saying is. But the scorecard book is the book blueprint scorecard is the framework that we use. So in that, I go into the details of the 8 steps that can help you think about the book in the sense of a conversation starting book rather than a traditional book. Because from a conversational starting book, which is much easier to create and delivers that value to people with the outcome being a further conversation and starting to work with you, not the academic be all and end all authority on a subject. So we talk about that authority that people see you as by having the book. All of these examples, if you were to read them and compare them with what you might think is a traditional authoritative book, very different. I mean, we're talking about 60 to 120 pages. We're talking about a somewhat conversational format, or carrying your tone of voice within it, because again, the outcome, the ultimate result of the book is that someone talks to you. And if you have something written, ghost written, there's the other end of the spectrum that's very authoritative and doesn't sound like you at all. That then doesn't resonate when you actually meet someone and have that conversation. So the idea of these 8 elements that just simplify the process, that keep you focused on the outcome, which is this is a book to build a business, to get people through the door, to increase our list so that we can talk to them over the long term. All of those elements, it's a very different way of thinking than the traditional model. And the benefit to us as business owners, as opposed to authors, is we get the majority of the light and heat and credibility without all of the headache and the overhead and the unnecessary elements of spending tens of thousands of dollars or months and months of time.
Now, separately, you've told me the sort of rough idea of cost on this one, but let's just remind our listeners, if I was interested in this, and I think a lot of them will be, if I was interested in this, yeah, I've got 90 minutes, no problem. I'm gonna do that. And I'm sure you might, I can prepare myself for those 90 minutes. So to make the most of it for both of us. And basically then your book is in train. Now, at the end of the day, at the end of when it's produced and back with me, how much am I in for roughly?
So our process is between 3,000 and 6,000, depending on how much you want us to do. So the lower end of that is 60 minutes worth of recording. It's all brought together in a book format, so it's a physical book. We're a marketing company, we're not a publishing company, so we don't want to own this in any sense. So we make sure that it's back in your Amazon account, that you've got the assets that you can change and update if you want to. Obviously, we're there to support, so if you want us to do more on it, we can do more on it as well. So that $3,000 end of the market, it's great if you want to test, if you've got an idea, but you're not quite sure, because we're all about the return on investment. So if you've maybe got a lower lifetime value of clients, if you've got an idea of the market that you want to address, but you're not absolutely sure of it, if you're going into a new market where it's untested, the $3,000 book is perfect because it will bring together your ideas. And the way that we work with you is to get the title that resonates with that single target audience that we're trying to pick. Yeah. We want to guide you towards the call to action so that people have got a clear path of what to do next. We want to make sure that their outline, the table of contents, is relevant to that journey that you're bringing people towards, and you're not going off on scope. So that lower end of the market is perfect for that. If you've got a higher lifetime value of clients where it's worth putting that extra effort in, if you've got a little bit more of an idea about what you want to talk about, and you want to talk more for 90 minutes worth of content rather than 60 minutes, obviously that's 50% more stuff that we'll do something with. If you've got this one, for example, is an example of, I mean, it's mine, obviously, but this is an example of the higher tier one. And we've got like QR codes in here that links to videos. So this has got 8 main chapters that walks through the process. Each one of them has got a supporting video and a worksheet that goes along with it. So that scope of what you can do, from a testing the water and seeing what's out there through to something that's a little bit more refined and has more supporting material. The idea of doing that rather than spending 30, 60, $100,000+ on a more traditional book. Actually, I had a call with someone 6 months ago now, and they have a company, a publishing company as well. They work with kind of like retiring CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. So a very different target market from us. Yeah. But they're 200,000+, which is perfect for what they're doing. But for us as regular business owners, where the job of work of what we're trying to do is engage more people to come in the door and do more business, even $30,000 as a project, which is pretty standard, is it's
too much.
That's a lot. Yeah,
no,
that's a lot of.
I suppose you could regard that. Let's look at the 3,000, the cheaper end of this investment. You could look at this as almost being get a book for nothing, because you're going to sell some of those books that come back. You don't have to sell very many books to get $3,000 back.
Yeah.
Then you're effectively putting a marketing credential in place for net cost zero.
But you're not going to sell them, though, are you, Kevin? I mean, you're not.
Well, it depends what you're going to do.
My guess is that 90% of these are not sold, are they?
No, that's not the. So we give everyone the opportunity to put it in their Amazon account because 2 reasons. One, it puts it out there and people can make sales on it. Right. And 2, it just is an easy way for people to order more copy. Amazon's KDP platform allows you just to reorder it, and it's seamless. It's easy. The benefit, to Kevin's point, is that although the majority of people are dealing with digital copies of the book rather than physical, because there's just a scale and a volume thing that makes it easier. But if you do want to have physical copies, I mean, one model would be okay, download a physical copy of the book, download a digital copy of the book. If you want a physical copy of the book, then hey, here's the link to get the physical copy of it. Because that way, in all of the outbound marketing that you're doing, trying to get people on the list, you're giving them the digital one first. So you're capturing those details. And the fact that you include an email and says, oh, by the way, if you want to go and buy it, you can do here. Some people just like the physical one. So when we're talking about it from a marketing perspective, the majority of the time is think about this as an investment into a lead generation funnel and do whatever you can do to give it away. So, and give it away might be the digital version or it might be the physical version. So let's think about referrals for a second. So a lot of people will say, oh yeah, we love referrals. Any opportunity, we're more than happy. Our business thrives on referrals, all these kind of generic terms that people use, but they're always passive referrals. They're not orchestrated. You might mention it every now and then to a client, or the client might say, oh, I was just telling Mary about you. Did they contact you? And then obviously you've never heard from Mary because Mary's life has gone on and she's forgotten about it. But let's say, for example, you had some physical copies of the book, and every time that someone came into the office, you gave them a physical copy and said, hey, we're coming up to the summer.
Yeah.
People are out there in sandals now, and actually you'll probably hear some friends talking about their dodgy toe. If you hear anyone talking about it, give them a copy of the book because there's some pointers there and there's some next steps. So that benefit of or a value proposition of using the digital version versus the physical one versus selling it for a cost. There's a job of work for each of those, but for most people, it's not about selling the book.
But in my view, I think, certainly for my clients, aiming at, shall we say, the affluent market, one of the things that they want from you is to feel that, well, you're pretty good at something, and whether if that's investment or whatever. So you've written the book on it, and you pop it in a shock and awe box, and you're sending it to a potential client. It strengthens that shock and awe box infinitely.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
It's something that says, oh, God, blimey, I've got a book from the guy that I'm going to potentially do some business with. And you did it in 90 minutes.
Yeah. So imagine a scenario where you've got a list of the top, so that high net worth affluent clients, and affluent either on the consumer end of the market or the executive end, they're hard to get to people because they're behind gatekeepers. So this is a soft copy version of the book, so 120 pages or so. Imagine doing this but running off 100 hard copy versions, getting that list of that top tier clients the one-on-one people who you want to engage with, physically sending them a hard copy version of your book in a shopping and awe package with one of the pages on the chapters turned down with a post-it note on the front of it saying, hey, Bob, we've actually just brought together this book from some of our learnings. I saw on LinkedIn that you were posting about such and such. I just wanted to share this copy with you because this chapter talks about it. Hope you get some value. See you out there in the world. When you phone up or send an email 2 weeks later, the likelihood of that person taking your call is astronomically through the roof compared with just a cold call of, hey, Bob, I can help you do whatever.
Don't you think, though? I mean, I've been neurotic about that. He's bent the corner of a page in a book. I mean, that's ruined it. Absolutely ruined it. But it's a brilliant idea. No, I love it. I think I'd have palpitations. It's like writing in a book. I can't do it.
I'm with you, Greg. I can't write in books. I can't deface books. I even get annoyed when somebody's read the book and they've managed to bend the spine.
Well, they probably haven't read the book in that case.
Send them a paperback copy with it bent over, and then send a note in there saying, hey, you might be like me and neurotic about it, so I included a hardback version that you can keep, but here's the one that you can read.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I love it.
All of those things.
Yeah.
All of those things. I mean, the idea is that we're people trying to connect with other people, and there's so much kind of digital marketing and mass churn and burn type approaches of, hey, it's a volume game, you just need to keep going. But at the end of the day, it's one person trying to talk to another person. So that was a silly example that we just came up with. But you can imagine the recipient on the other end.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it's you actually writing something and you were joking about something that they may or may not resonate with, the whole opportunity to bridge what would otherwise be a cold connection opportunity with no personality and no connection into something that is just a little bit more dealt with like you're a real person. So that's one of the reasons why we write the books in the way that we do. There's two reasons, really. One is we don't ghostwrite at all. Ghostwrite very quickly gets you into the $30,000 range. So because we're trying to keep it cost effective for people, we record and interview you as if it was a presentation from stage and we were facilitating that talk. So you're trying to deliver your best words possible in an outline that we've pre-agreed, and we all know which way we're going. And it's agreed because it's leading people from the cover to the back cover. So we're supporting that. But the editing that we do is to tighten the words that you actually say. So there's, again, two reasons to do that. One is cost. We're trying to keep this as cost effective as possible. But the second one, like I said at the beginning, the outcome is that you want to have a conversation with that person. When you follow up with that executive and they've read that chapter of the book talking about the thing that they'd already talked about, and you join that conversation that's already going on in their mind, the way that you speak and the terms that you use and the examples that you've got are represented in the book. The language that you're using, that person's hearing it for the second time. And the first time that they saw it, it was written in a book. So some of that authority and the outsized credibility that a book has, even if it's the book that you wrote yourself, the fact that they've read it there and then you're repeating in a similar kind of tone and phrase, the likelihood of them, they took your call in the first place because they resonated what was there. The fact that they're hearing it for the second time and you're amplifying some existing words, that's another reason for doing it in the way that we do it.
So do you get enough out of the 60 minutes? Or do you have to start padding that out to make it a sensible length for a book?
No, that's a great question. So the shortest book we've done that I can remember is a book for a guy called Bill Bloom, who's a financial advisor up in Chicago. So he wrote a book that was 27 pages maybe, and it was Retire As You Desire. And it was 5 or 6 very short points about a retirement framework. So the way that he uses it, it's less about the very top of the funnel. He's not advertising that particular book. But when anyone touches the organization, or in that referral sense that I used before, they get this book because it's very succinct and very specific and a very easy introduction to a particular financial management framework. So it's not an academic piece. As I said before, we're not a publishing company, we're a marketing company. So from a marketing perspective, that 27-page book is the perfect length for the job of work it does in the overall funnel. Now, if we were a publishing company and we were all making money from book sales and we had to justify a $15 cost on the Amazon shelf where it's next to Dave Ramsey and Monty Hall and all of these other traditional publishers, then you're into a padding scenario because it's almost you get paid for the number of words. I liken it back when people talk about length. I liken it back to that kind of Henry Ford analogy of the production line goes down and no one can fix it, and they call the expert in, and the expert kind of looks at the machine and draws a cross with a piece of chalk and says, hit it with a hammer there, and it all springs back to life. And he says, that'll be $10,000, please. And I say, $10,000 for a chalk mark on the machine? What do you mean? Well, no, it was $1 for the chalk mark, but it was $9,999 to know where to put that chalk mark in the first place. Yeah. So there's the same with the content of the book. The job of work is to start a conversation and add value to someone whose toe is hurting, or who is thinking about needing a financial planner but doesn't know where the first place to start is, or who is thinking about creating a shock and awe package for their clients but doesn't really know how to contextualize it, or what's the most important part of a shock and awe package, the physical delivery or the follow-up. All of these things, it's starting it. So that was a bit of a long way of saying 60 minutes. So the lower tier product is around 60 minutes recording, and the higher tier product is closer to 90 minutes. From 60 minutes, if we've done a good job of the outline and you've come to the call thinking about what you're going to say, imagine delivering a presentation from stage for 60 minutes. You can share quite a bit of information. Now, if you turned up to stage and hadn't really thought about it before, and you're umming and ahhing and if we ask you a question, you give us a one-word answer, that's not going to turn into a very big book. But for most people, you'll get 60 pages worth of content out of 60 minutes worth of recording.
That's good.
Now, the good thing is, again, we're not a publishing company. We want to get that version to you as quick as possible so that you can take a look at it. And what typically happens is that people will look at it and they'll be fine with it and just move forward because they're kind of go, 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 go. Other people will look at it and say, oh, you know what, we recorded that, but I suddenly thought I kind of missed a bit of a chapter here, so let me quickly add that in. Or other people will say, okay, I'm looking at it here, I said it in this way, maybe that's a bit clunky. Let me quickly reword it. Or the last example is, hey, actually, I've just thought I've got a case study here and I've got a diagram here and I've got this extra way of describing it here. Let me add all of those things in. So it's pretty common that people will take that version 1 and then elaborate and expand on it to get a version 2, not really going for a particular page count, but going for, hey, I've actually got this stuff that I can add in that makes sense.
Now, this has got me thinking here, Stuart. And I'll quite often run a workshop. I'll present on something for 60 minutes. Does this effectively mean that I could take one of those workshops and turn it into a book very, very easily?
It does, but in a particular way. So we quite often will get people saying, hey, I've got a webinar or workshop, or I've got this thing already done. Can you just take that and change it? And when we started, we would try and do that. And very quickly, we wanted to murder anyone that suggested it and jump off the top of a roof ourselves, because it's such a heavy lift to try and change something into something else. But what you have got with that existing presentation is the outline that makes for a perfect book and a ton of supporting material in the content that you've got. So in that scenario, what we would say is that's perfect. Share the outline with us. Let's refine it slightly to make it more suitable for the job of work of a book. And now let's record it in the normal 60-minute way, because then what we've got is the content that's perfectly aligned to the job of work, the outcome of being a book. Trying to take something that's recorded and then turn it into a book is difficult, because the way that you deliver that presentation, it's for a different context rather. You're either relying on feedback if you were in person, or you're relying on slides if you're doing it on a webinar type thing. The language that the tone of voice that you've got on a webinar is different than you would record it for a book. So the very easiest way for you to do it is to take an additional 60 minutes to kind of do it again, but do it fit for purpose. But then take the existing stuff. Maybe you want to put some slides in the book. Again, depending on how complex they are, it may or may not make sense. What you might want to do is take that presentation and the audio of it and offer that as an upsell or a value add in the email chain to amplify some of the points.
Earlier, Stuart, you mentioned this 8-point sort of structure that people would, structure their conversation in that 60, 90 minutes. Give us an idea of those points. Give us an idea of what those points are so we can put some sort of thought in our head. Yeah,
exactly. And I'll shoot you a link as well so that people can grab a copy of the book. But the 8 elements, and I remember that getting the right way around, but basically it's broken into 3 sections. It's the who it is that we're trying to engage with, the what it is that we're doing, and then what to do next. So think about it hierarchically like that, which for most things, as we're doing in a marketing sense, makes sense.
In another context, we're both aware of, buyer, offer, and you're adding CTA at the end.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when you think about the job of work of the book, it's that exact same thing. It's just a different format, which again is different from a traditional book. If you think of, whenever you say book, people think about traditional book, and that is a very different thing than this to us, but not to the reader, which is why we get some of that authority that comes along with it. So anyway, the outline of the 8 elements are, first thing you want to do is pick that single target audience. Right. Think about this as a campaign tool. All of us in business can probably serve 5 to 50 audiences, depending on how disciplined we are. But for this job of work, we're trying to engage one audience because we want it to resonate with that person. We want the examples to be relevant, and we want to make it easy for them to take a next step. Too broad is too difficult. So single target audience. Now that we know who it is that we want to talk to, we can now think about the language that they use, the problem that they've got, so we can pick a title that resonates with them. Mm-hmm. Our friend Dean Jackson, who's my business partner in this, often says the easiest way to sell a horse is to write a sign saying horse for sale. Yeah. I think that was originally someone else's, but this idea of just straight to the problem that's in hand. Don't be clever. We're trying to interrupt them in their day, and we need to be obvious. So a title that resonates. The subheading on a book is now extra text that allows us to amplify the heading. So we don't want to go wide. We don't want to throw in a whole load of other things. I remember seeing years ago, I drove past South London somewhere, drove past a laundrette, and it was something like, laundrette. And then as the business has developed over the years, there was like extra things on the side. So it was like laundrette, money transfer, internet cafe, and parcel service. Like this one building, they were trying to do everything. So with the subheading, we don't want to do that because it distracts. We want to amplify and pull some of the emotional triggers of the title. Next, we want to think about the call to action. What do we want them to do next? So we know the beginning point of the journey. What's the end point of the journey? So the back cover on a traditional book is traditionally trying to sell the book. Well, the back cover here, that doesn't work because we've already given them the copy of the book. The back cover is what we want them to do next. So they've read a book on how to build a shock and awe package. So the next thing would be head over to the website and consume more stuff, or download the shock and awe checklist to see how your shock and awe package measures up. And then the third one would be reach out for a call. So where they're going. So now that we know the A to Z of it, the bookends, now we're talking about in the middle. So the first thing that people see when they open it is the table of contents. And we know that readership rates are actually pretty low. And that's even for fiction books, where the whole job of work of the book is to read the damn thing, but still readership rates are low. For non-fiction books, it's even lower. So the table of contents is your opportunity to signpost to people that, yes, they're in the right place. And yes, this is an obvious next step to take. So we want to build the table of contents to be very much, I got a copy of the book because of this thing. I'm being led towards this next step. So even if I only look to the table of contents, oh yes, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, next step. Now that we've got the outline mapped out, we want to make sure that the content adds value, and we don't want to bait and switch people into, oh, here's some problems and I'm going to jab you a little bit on why you're doing it wrong. But actually, to do it right, you need to call in and I'll book a meeting with you, and then I'll lock the door behind you, and then we can talk and get a piece of paper out. So we want to make sure that there's value-driven content in the book itself. So we've got the title, the subheading, the call to action, the outline, the content itself. The last two things are this idea of beneficial constraints. So this is a non-critical project for all of us. If we don't get to it, no one's going to tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, you committed to doing this book. Why haven't you done it yet? We're all business owners, and the benefit is we can do what we want, and the downside is we can do what we want. So this idea of beneficial constraints is twofold. One is making external commitments. So given that this project, even if you thought about it as like a 3-month project, look at what's in the calendar 3 months out, and how can this tool be used, and build some marketing plans around it. So you give yourself a psychological deadline that you wouldn't necessarily have if you didn't do that. So that's one constraint. It's the time constraint. Another constraint is the scope constraint. We've all been doing this long enough. We could keep writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, and we'd never get the thing finished, or we'd go off on a tangent because we know this whole world. So we want to add more stuff. So this is definitely a case where less is more. Stick to that outline, understand that the book is just the jumping off point of the conversation. We're trying to get people's email addresses, all of that other stuff, add it into an email sequence, engage that person for the next 6 months in that additional content rather than trying to put it in the book. Because again, we know that it's the minority of people who act today and the majority who act over the long run.
Over the years, I've followed Dean's work online and various things, and Dean's, of course, credited with the landing page. I mean, he's the guy who originally came up with the landing page back in the day. And but the thing about you and Dean as partners in this business, the one question I have for you is, who comes up with more great ideas, you or Dean?
Dean's unique ability is to take something that's complicated and simplify it. Yeah. It's a magic trick. I remember hearing someone talking about Alan Turing and the genius level of what he did. And they're describing it as a layperson, you can see someone who's very intelligent and you can look at the work that they do and be impressed by it, but look at it and think, oh yeah, I can see how you got from there to there. That makes sense. A genius, you'll look at it and just think, where in God's name did that come from? I mean, that's just unbelievable. And Dean's ability to simplify the ideas and cut through, that is really the premise of the 90-minute book idea. It's this idea that all of this traditional stuff, all of this bestseller BS that's out there, as business owners, that's fine if you want to be this thing over here. But us as business owners, 90% of that is expensive and unnecessary. the distilled magic of the book is that you've got something that resonates with someone who's got a problem that you can help with, and you're delivering something of value that can facilitate and start that conversation. So Dean's ability to do that, both in terms of looking at this as a book model, and then as he's dealing with his own coaching clients and the when we do some of the workshops, just to be able to distill it down to that unique ability is or unique message. That's his magic trick. Now, getting him to follow through and do any of the nuts and bolts, forget about it. We're very a good team, because his unique ability is very much that genius idea creation of simplifying something.
Yeah.
And I enjoy making it real and coming up with the programs and the system and building it out into something that's a product.
I've got to say, you are a fascinating chap, and we're both part of something called Mech Labs AI. You tell us just a minute of your time, just to give us an idea of what Mech Labs AI is and what the potential is for other people.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity. So, funnily enough, and again, having worked with over 1,000 people in the book side of things, and goodness knows how many hundreds or thousands in Dean's world, it always surprises me how one degree of separation, and there can be huge worlds that just never overlap. So Flint McLaughlin, who is the owner of Mech Labs, has been a leader in this space for decades. Mm-hmm. But it was actually Christy who works for me she is the person who does most of the work to those early stages of getting the content out of people in the book. She actually knew of Flint before I did, so he just introduced me earlier this year. But one of the frameworks within Mech Labs is this idea of the 8 micro yeses, and that as people come into a funnel, gravity is always making them fall out. It's almost like an inverse funnel, and gravity makes them fall out, and they have to ascend through the top rather than what you would traditionally think of a funnel and people falling down. So it's inertia and the planet working against you rather than working with you. So their framework has this idea of the 8 micro yeses, and someone has to resonate on each of these 8 levels. And yes, I'm in the right place in order to take that action. So coincidentally, that was the way that we came to the books. Someone needs to resonate with the title. They need to see the table of contents. They need to have an easy minimum viable commitment next step. So we had a similar approach, but just not the framework. So Mech Labs as a methodology, and the fact that they've got 10,000 detailed use cases behind it that support it, it's allowed us to put our book model on top of the Mech Labs model, and we can very quickly now ideate and come up with the principles and the downstream assets that we can create. So it's a very good tool.
Have you been, I mean, the one thing I picked up something from another group that I'm part of, which a copywriting group, and one of the things that they were talking about was this new ability to actually mimic your voice. So for instance, if you wanted my voice for my 90-minute book, or for the book that is created within 90 minutes, you would potentially, there are things out there that might record 2 minutes of my voice and the way I speak, and it would then be applied. That's all they need, is a couple of minutes of you, and then the rest of the book could be written, could be spoken in my voice, but I wouldn't have been doing it. I wonder if that's something you've come across and are planning for your books, because audiobooks all the rage. Kevin listens to them all the time.
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, it's those tools. So I've got a good friend in the UK called Alok Shukla, whose business partner is Pierce Linney, one of the sharks. So they've got a company called Implement AI. So they've got a voice-based model. It's more on the customer service type model, but the voice elements of that and the interaction element to it is fantastic. 11 Labs is another service that does this voice synthesis.
I was thinking.
The fact that technology and the way that we do things is now intersecting. So I said before that we interview you to get the content of the book. So we've got that raw recording of your voice in the first place. Now, it's not usually smooth enough to just use as a book. Yeah. Oftentimes what we'll say to people is use it as a supporting behind the scenes type view of it and just add value that way. But what we're looking at now doing is 2 things. One, in the Mech Lab sense, is having the AI version of your book. So from that content and other content, we can now build a Kevin bot that dialed into this particular thing that you want to talk about, but allows outside people to query you on what you spoke about and the idea that you have. But the second thing, to your point about the recording, we've already got 60 minutes, 90 minutes or more of your voice. We've then got the final edited product, so it's a little bit tighter. So that's absolutely part of the higher tier products of being able to do this, marrying in the technology with the stuff that's already created. And for us, it's led to a whole downstream suite of tools that we can use and separate businesses that are being built around it.
Well, Stuart, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know that you have to dash for another meeting, but I have to say it's been a real pleasure sharing this 90-minute book story with us. Thank you for being on the Next 100 Days podcast.
It's a pleasure, guys. It's a pleasure. I'll shoot you a link to the book so that people can grab a copy of it. I know I ran through it a little bit fast there, but I guess the leaving thought, if anything, would just be that everyone has the knowledge in them already. If you've been in business for more than a year, you've got the knowledge already. The idea of forgetting about a traditional best-selling book when you say book and think about this conversation starting idea, whether you do it with us or not, that's do it with us could be the best, but if you just do it, but take those ideas and bring it together, and it makes it so accessible. And it's such a great way of starting that conversation with someone who you can really help. It just makes the world a better place.
Well, Graham, we've talked about writing books often enough, but that idea that you can get something together out of, it's a bit more than 60 or 90 minutes, because you're going to talk through your book in 60 minutes. You've got to have that tight outline to start off with. So you can probably say it's double that sort of time. It's a really, really great approach to getting something in print fast.
Yeah. I mean, Stuart's done hundreds and hundreds of these books. And so you have to say to yourself, he's an expert. And there he was showing us his own version. And working with Dean Jackson, I mean, it would be like a dream from my point of view, because he's an amazing chap. And for him, I can see where they work well together, because Dean does make things simple. But for instance, Dean came up with the 9-word email. Now, if you've ever written an email, you're always tempted to try and sort of put more than you need to. And Dean sort of came across this. Well, he invented the idea that basically, an email that just more or less says that, Kevin, are you still interested in high net worth data? Graham. I mean, you add those words up, they'll be somewhere near 9. And the point is,
you feel compelled to answer that, don't you?
It doesn't give you a sort of, I'm going to ignore it. And the response rate to that is general. And it's a great way of actually following up people who've not, who've just not responded to you in some way. And they feel compelled to respond. Yeah. So this is Dean, and Dean thinks these things through. You can see where the idea of the 90-minute book and the structure that Stuart's just gone through as to why they do it in that particular way. Really clever stuff.
Very, very clever stuff. I'd love to delve a little bit deeper into this. I'm actually going to get a hold of Stuart's book and give it a read. See if that flushes out some more ideas.
Well, yeah, the thing about your role, Kevin, I think you are fast becoming, given the number of podcasts you've done for the Grow CFO show. I mean, you're how many other people in that sector have got your vista, if you like, of the market? Not many.
Yeah, and that's almost a problem in a way, Graham, because you know a whole load across a very, very wide subject area. And I think that the beauty of what Stuart's talking about here is the idea of really, really niching that down. So you're talking to a specific person about a very specific problem.
Yeah. And
that does mean a very short, very direct book. I'm thinking of you and I and the amount of stuff that we've covered across 470 plus episodes of this podcast.
Is it as many as that? I'm not quite sure it is as many as that, but it's 400 and odd. I don't know how many. But,
But we could probably quite easily brainstorm half a dozen ideas,
Yeah.
which in Stuart's way of thinking, probably half a dozen books.
Oh, for sure. No, I get that, because at the end of the day, there is a sort of methodology that goes into our conversations. That, our approach is not to script, but to have some sense of direction. And some of the questions might over time come up again and again, because we're fascinated with people, we're fascinated with their thinking about a particular subject. And it reminds me of an interviewing technique that I had when I was working at Royal Mail. And the one thing that I was taught as a operational interviewer was this idea of intellectual application. How wide could somebody think? And that's the idea of you knowing more about, well, a lot of things, but a fairly thin level. But then you kind of you flip them into a sort of you probe them down to see how deep they can think about a particular subject, and inevitably that can splinter off into a couple of different alternatives, which they are then prompted to look at practical judgment. So the whole idea of having that sort of wide-ranging conversation, but then we're able to drive them down a little bit and then put them to the sword, if you like, between one alternative and another. Not that we put our guests to the sword, but at the end of the day, it's quite interesting as a framework for a conversation. But it's a different framework from his own framework. And what is interesting to me is the framework that he uses and Dean uses, and the one that Flint McLaughlin uses at MECLABS. Very similar. Very similar.
Yeah.
So,
frameworks fascinate me, Graham.
Yeah.
Just understanding them, seeing how they work. Yeah. All good stuff.
Well, it's been another interesting podcast, this time with Stuart Bell of the 90-Minute Book. And I think we'll put links in the show notes for you to chase him up, because if you're not thinking that you need a book, then you probably need to rethink what you need to do in terms of your marketing strategy over the next year or two. Because it would be a great way of elevating your particular authority in your niche with a book.
Indeed.
So today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.